So good morning, and earlier today we've already touched on privacy threat modeling a little bit. Someone mentioned Linden at some point. Someone talked about the AI risk management framework. And so what we're going to try to do this morning is tell you a bit more about a new framework that we call UsersFirst, and it's focusing on the user side of privacy threat modeling, especially in the context of notices and choices. Just to potentially put a little bit of perspective, so this is an example of a sign, a real sign that someone posted outside of a store around 2020 to satisfy CCPA requirements. So this was intended to be the notice and choice approach to CCPA, placed at knee height at the entrance of a store to let people know that, hey, if you want to, you might be able to opt out. And so, yes, I hear the laughs, so I'm not going to even ask the question. And this is another example that's intended to illustrate what we're going to be talking about. And that's another one of those menus where you can go completely crazy and start toggling things on and off. And I'm sure many of you would like to do that. As I think we also realize, and I don't know why there's echo. Are you getting echo too, or is it just me? I'm just the only one. Maybe I should stand somewhere else. Okay. Yeah. So as you probably all realize, over the past few years, we've increasingly seen regulatory requirements that are saying it's not enough to just say the notice is somewhere, good luck finding it, or the choice, is very deep in that privacy policy. You can definitely find it, and good luck with that too. Instead, increasingly, regulatory requirements say you better make sure that people can find this thing. You better make sure that people can understand this thing. You better make sure that it's not manipulative and so on. And obviously, these requirements vary. And it's not just about addressing these requirements, but I think there's an increasing realization that it's not enough to say, hey, put that notice somewhere, and that should do the trick. And so in our approach here, we view areas where notices and choices fall short as privacy threats. Effectively, people will not effectively be able to take advantage of notices and choices that they're supposed to have access to unless you do a better job. And so we try to basically develop and provide a framework that's intended to address that. So what's the purpose of doing this? Well, there's been obviously a movement towards increasingly helping people with privacy threat modeling, and the objective here is to say, okay, you know that they've got all these issues, but it looks a bit like chaos. How about if we try to develop a framework that helps you organize your thinking and help you organize your work when it comes to systematically identify shortcomings when it comes to these different kinds of threats. And so that's exactly the same thing that we're trying to do when it comes to addressing those user-oriented threats, those user-oriented shortcomings when it comes to the presentation of notices and choices to users. And obviously, I've mentioned other frameworks, so this is part of an overall movement, not just in privacy. Obviously, AI, security are other areas where people have tried to do the same thing. And the emphasis is really on being systematic, also on documenting things, and also, in truth, in not being overly prescriptive. And that's a tricky thing when you try to design these sorts of frameworks. It's not like you want to tell people, this is wrong, this is right. Different jurisdictions, different regulations have different perspectives. Instead, it's about providing this framework that's going to help you organize your thinking, your work, and documenting things, but allowing different organizations to have slightly different perspectives, depending on the regulations that they're falling under, depending on how much time and effort they're willing to devote to these things, depending on how aggressive or not they might want to be in protecting or potentially not protecting their users. And so, again, it is not also about trying to reinvent the wheel. There are excellent frameworks out there that we teach in our own privacy engineering program. At Carnegie Mellon, we teach Linden, we teach Panoptic. I teach also the AI risk management framework from NIST. So those are things that are excellent, but we believe also in supplementing that to more specifically address the user side of these frameworks, and in privacy, the user side of privacy threat modeling. So for instance, if you look at Linden, the U stands for unaware, right? What does that mean? Well, it's effectively, Linden is a great framework, again, we teach it, but U means basically unaware, meaning, hey, people may not necessarily realize that this notice is available, they may not necessarily know how to use this choice, so it's a catch-all. And what we've really tried to do is we've tried to sort of break that down into something that's a bit more usable and a bit more practical. And so when you start to do this sort of work, you've got to try to accommodate obviously a variety of different jurisdictions, the fact that there are many different organizations out there. Some of them have more time, more resources available, others may not. And you want to have something that's going to be useful to all these different organizations under different jurisdictions. So it's not about being overly prescriptive here, but it's about trying to help organizations and try to help them organize their work in this area. Okay, the echo is back when I stand here. And so why users first? So who is that user? Well, what we mean by user here is we mean the users of those notices and choices that you should be providing to people. So it's not the user of the system per se. It could be, obviously, lots of systems collect a ton of data about their users, but it might also very well be the person passing by in front of a camera that's supporting video analytics, who is not really the user of that camera, but happens to be a data subject in this context. And so the user here refers to the person, the individual who should be able to consume effectively that notice or that choice. That's what we mean by user, the user of the notice or the choice. And so what do we mean by user-oriented threats? Well, when you start breaking things down in this space, you find, or at least we found, that there are 4 top-level categories of threats. There are threats that have to do with the fact that notice and choice are difficult to identify, they may not even be present, difficult to discover, difficult to access in different contexts. It's very important to think about context in this sort of line of work. Difficult to comprehend, so it's there, you can find it, but you've got no clue what it means. Potentially choices are inadequate, tons of choices, but they're not really aligned with what people care about. And finally, manipulative types of threats. So threats where basically you're trying, intentionally or not, to potentially influence people and get them to do things that perhaps are not to their best advantage. And again, this is a very quick presentation. It's really intended to be as a teaser, and I've got to make sure that in about 1 minute, I pass the baton to Lorrie, otherwise we're going to be falling behind. But this framework that we've developed has effectively 2 phases. So there's a phase that's intended for people who are designing a brand new system, and it's guiding them through a process where they try to organize the notices and choices they want to support, how they're going to surface these notices and choices through different types of touch points, how they're going to design the effective, these notices and choices to be effective, thinking about the text, but also thinking about visual elements and other elements that might be relevant, and eventually testing that and guiding all this through design patterns. And then there's an analysis phase, which we're going to spend a bit more time talking about today. And we've got studies also supporting the effectiveness of this framework. And the analysis phase is for either prototypes that you're in the process of refining or potentially existing systems, which is obviously the case for most systems out there. So you've got an existing system and you want to find out where you might be falling short in terms of providing people with effective notices and choices. The framework that we've developed helps you basically go through that process and identify those notices and choices. So very quickly, before I pass the baton to Lorrie, so there is in this framework the idea that you want to systematically identify the notices and choices that you want to support and analyze. You want to think very carefully about who these users are, in what context should they be able to effectively access these notices and choices, and what does that mean in terms of these notices and choices being truly effective. You want to think about a threat taxonomy. So beyond the 4 top-level classes of threats that I've described, we've broken things down in order to make it easier for people to organize their thinking and identify all sorts of different ways in which the design that they have or the system that they have falls short. And obviously time is very short, but in the analysis phase, you use all this and you come up with a bunch of different things that are wrong, and then you work on mitigating those threats. And if you have time, I strongly encourage you to access our website and to look at all the glory details about how this framework works and the various elements that we have in the taxonomy. It's really intended to support people, enable them to be very systematic in the way in which they approach this. And Lorrie will now illustrate that as quickly as she can with an example.
Thank you, Norman. Yeah, so on our website, we have these taxonomy tables which talk about all of our individual threats, and there's detailed examples of all of them. I'm just going to walk you through some examples here. So this is a real website, and it has this cookie banner, and you might look at this cookie banner and say, yeah, it's not really a great example of notice and choice. So you might look at it and say, it seems kind of manipulative. So here I've summarized the manipulative threats that are in our taxonomy. Does anybody see one of these that looks present in there? You can just yell it out. Anybody sees any? Yeah, so lots of things here. And so asymmetric effort is the one that really pops out at me. But you can actually probably decide that it's also visually manipulative. There are non-privacy protective defaults and other problems. And so the idea is you would look through and look at the definitions of each of these things and say, are any of these present in this interface? Now, if you click on Manage My Choices on this interface, this is where you end up. And unfortunately, there are some problems on this page as well. So if we look at our discovery and use threats, so we have a whole bunch of them here, do any of them jump out as things that are problematic about this interface? No reject all. What else? Poor organization, yeah. There are a bunch of problems here. I would start with, it's just too much effort. It turns out you have to go through each of those tabs if you want to actually find out what you're agreeing to here. Okay, here's another one. If we click through here, let's look at comprehension. Do you see any comprehension problems here? Yes, there are legitimate interest. Like, what does that mean to an end user? No idea. Any other problems? Yeah, confusing buttons, toggles, and checkboxes. I have no idea what these toggles actually mean. And then also, there's like a whole bunch of them. So I might say there are excessive or redundant choice options, in this case, excessive. I don't know if you can see the scroll bar on the right. It scrolls quite a bit, and there's like 50 more toggles on this page. That meets my definition of excessive. Yeah. Okay, so that's basically, the idea is that an analyst would look through an interface, use this taxonomy to flag potential problems. And some of them are a little bit debatable. Like some people might say, oh, that's a really bad problem. And I showed you some really obvious ones. And others, it would be a discussion on the team to decide, is this a problem we need to fix or not? And then depending on the problem you identify, there would be different mitigations. So, if the problem is discovery and use, it's hard to find the interfaces. Maybe we need to, have a centralized place, a dashboard or something to find all of our notices and choices. If it's a comprehension problem, maybe we need to simplify language. Maybe we need to look at putting better labels on our toggles and our buttons. We need to make sure we're using consistent language throughout our interface. If the problem is appropriate choices, maybe we need to think through the granularity of the choices that we're offering. And if it's manipulative elements, we need to make sure that we have accept and reject and that they are equal paths, and that we're not just highlighting the non-privacy protective choices. Okay, so we did some work to see whether this is actually useful to people. So far, the work is mostly in the lab. We'd love to have you all actually try it out and let us know how it goes, because this is definitely a work in progress. So you can check this out on our website. So we did an initial taxonomy development with our students. Lots of CMU students were involved. And we did our first study. We actually had our privacy engineering students try to use this and apply this to real websites. And we compared it to using Linden. And of course, it did much better than Linden because Linden is not really designed for this purpose. Then we did a larger study where we interviewed 26 privacy professionals, maybe a few people in this room. And we had some of them use our taxonomy, some of them use their skills that they already had, and went through some hypothetical examples. that were based on real-world websites. So for example, this one, this was an app that we had them go through and played the role of a persona and used the taxonomy to identify problems. This one was an IoT device, a smart TV, and we had them go through with our persona and try to identify problems. And then we compared how many threats did they find with and without the taxonomy. The darker bars are the ones with the taxonomy, and you can see in each category, they were able to identify more threats. Anyway, lots more about this on our website. We invite you to check it out and to send us feedback on it. And we would be happy to take your questions.
So if I may add, those results really suggest that this framework as it exists, even though it's probably not perfect and we're planning to probably tweak a few elements over time, already makes a huge difference. I mean, the second study that Lorrie mentioned, we believe that this is very concrete, sort of went through a lot of work in developing interesting problems that are representative of the types of issues that one would want to be able to catch. And systematically, we found that this made a big difference. We are also continuing to update the website for UsersFirst, so there are case studies. There's a case study that will be posted later this week. There are a couple more that will be posted next week. And so this is all intended to make it easier and easier for people to start using that. And if you want to do a capstone with us in our privacy program, we're happy to work with you as well. But yes, questions.